Hello, welcome back. This is session 3 of CSEET paper 4 part B, and this is for Viva Boost for 30 marks. If you recollect, in the first session we understood the syllabus, and in the second session we understood something about listening skills and monologue. In the syllabus, we have 4 parts. At the moment, we are dealing with the first part, which consists of monologue, dialogue, and then grammar and vocabulary. In the session 2, when we discussed monologue, we understood the difference between hearing and listening. Then we understood the difference between monologue and dialogue. We also had some exercises. We had exercises where I read out certain text, you paid attention. Then I asked a couple of questions for which you all answered. We worked out 2 examples. We had to exercise. The first one was simpler than the second one. Now, in session 3, that is today's session, we will be understanding dialogue better with a small definition and then the explanation and examples, which would consist of exercise like the previous session. So what is a dialogue? If you remember, a monologue is a talk by one person, whereas dialogue is a talk by 2 or more people. So coming back to dialogue, a dialogue is a conversation between 2 or more people. A dialogue is a conversation between 2 or more people. In this, there would be instant reply, unlike monologue. There would be interaction throughout, unlike monologue. And there would be interruption, unlike in monologue. So dialogue is between 2 or more people, and then it could be a chit chat, it could be a confabulation, it could be a conversation, and many more. There'd be a lot of interaction happening, whereas in monologue there is no interaction till the end. Some of the well-known examples for dialogue are a conversation between a manager and an assistant manager, for example, or conversation between 2 or more persons, as I told earlier. To give a very well-known example of a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjun at the time of Kurukshetra in Mahabharata. Now, as I've always told you, we learn better with demonstration, or we learn better with performance or exercise or such. So instead of giving you a long lecture on what a dialogue is and reading out examples and stuff as such, I would like to take you through the first example. It's a very simple dialogue between 2 people. The dialogue which we have now would be a very simple dialogue or exchange of information or whatever between 2 people. So you please listen to the example, listen to the dialogue, listen to the conversation. Once you listen, let's go to answering the questions. So please pay attention now. This is a dialogue between 2 people. Anil: good morning, Bharat. Bharat: good morning, Anil. Anil: how have you been? Bharat: I have been good, but for this fear of COVID-19. I'm just waiting for this to get over. Anil: I don't think we must live in fear. We must learn to accept it and live well by building our immunity and eating healthy food and practicing hygiene. Bharat: that's true, Anil. We must live sensibly. Anil: yes, we must learn to accept situations. Bharat: thank you for the advice, Anil. Hope you all followed the dialogue. Just have a glance of that. Now let's have a few questions and let's see how well we can answer. Who are the two people conversing? Yes, very easy, very simple, because I repeated the names often. I repeated each one's name probably 4 times, so you wouldn't miss that. So during a conversation, during a dialogue, or during a monologue, there may be certain terms, certain information, certain concepts, certain phrases which would be repeated, which is easy for us to remember. But the conversation or the dialogue or the monologue would also have information, concepts, or words or phrases which may not be repeated often. Hence, a lot of stress is given to listening. You listen well, you will remember. Let's go to the second question now. What was the topic of the conversation? Sorry, the question mark is missing. Yeah. Yes, not a very difficult answer. The answer is COVID-19. Let me go back to the full form which I gave you on COVID-19. Could any one of you give me the full form? We discussed it last time. Yes. Coronavirus disease 19. The next question based on the dialogue is, who's worried about COVID-19? I don't know why I missed the question mark. Sorry. Who's worried about COVID-19? Yes, who's worried about COVID-19? Anil or Bharat? Yeah, it is Bharat. Next question. What does Anil advise? When Bharat shows his concern, Anil advises him. What does he advise? He advises that one should not live in fear and one should build immunity. The advice given here is, you should not live in fear and we must do something to build our immunity because we have to learn to live with it. So how was this dialogue? I'm very sure all of you found it very easy because there are certain terms which are repeated and the topic is very gentle, and of course the topic is being spoken by all every day. So you need not be a great brainer to remember this. Like previous session with monologue, here too I have another example with the difficulty level which is slightly higher than the previous one. So shall we get ready for the second dialogue, second example? Please pay attention. Shall I? Yes. The indication here when you look at the pictures may give you the feeling that it could be an interview. Anyway, let's find out. Interviewer: are you a company secretary aspirant? Interviewee: yes, I am a company secretary aspirant. Interviewer: what interests you about CS profession? Interviewee: the privilege of advising the board of directors interests me the most. Interviewer: what is the CS supposed to do as a key managerial personnel? Interviewee: as a key managerial personnel, a few important tasks of a company secretary includes advising the company on key policy matters, drafting the policies, conducting meetings, ensuring highest level of compliance. Interviewer: is the role of a CS very important in the modern corporate? Interviewee: yes, of course. Like how a healthy man is an asset to the country, a fully compliant company is also an asset. A CS job is related to compliance of statutory and regulatory requirements and hence it becomes important. Interviewer: thank you. We shall get back. Thanks for coming. Interviewee: thank you, sir. Now, shall we go to the questions? I understand the degree of difficulty is slightly more than the first exercise. Nevertheless, since the dialogue was on a topic which is very close to your heart and it's a profession which you all are preparing to pursue, it should be easy for you. Okay. Let's see what the first question is. What's the role of the company secretary discussed in this dialogue or interview? Anybody to answer? Yes. Simple. The role of the company secretary. Yeah. Next. Identify few important tasks of a company secretary according to this dialogue. The answer would be slightly lengthy. The first exercise was very simple. The second exercise is not so. The first question's answer is very simple. The second question's answer is slightly longer. So what's the answer? Ask for few important. He's given one. Advising the company on key policy matters, drafting the policies, conducting meetings, ensuring highest level of compliance. Like I said, the answer is slightly longer than the answer of the first one. So now you understand that probably the third question required a longer answer. However, we'll find out. What is a CS job related to according to the dialogue? Any answers? Yes, I think most of you got it. According to the dialogue, the CS job is related to compliance of statutory and regulatory requirements. So some of you would have found the second question a little more difficult than the third, and some of you vice versa. It depends on how well you know the role or your responsibilities of the profession you are aspiring to become later, or how much of concepts or how much of understanding you have of the subject, or how attentive you were when I read out the dialogue. This is just for your reference. Yeah. So, how was the session? Was it difficult? Definitely not, for the simple reason there's not much of a difference between what we did last session and this session, except the fact that you had to just understand who spoke what. Generally, when we perform in the organization or when we have conversation at home, when we have to repeat the conversation for various reasons, maybe to prove a point or to recollect or just give a summary, we tend to forget about who mentioned what. So it becomes very important for us to remember who spoke what. To make it easier, today I have made it in the form of a question and answer so that it's easy for you to remember, but all conversation or dialogue need not be in the same format. So before I conclude, we'll just have a quick wrap up. The third session, today we understood, we had a wrap up of the previous session and then we understood what a dialogue is. We had about 3 examples to know what exactly a dialogue is. We had 2 exercises of different level of understanding or difficulty. One was a very simple general topic, a conversation between 2 people called Anil and Bharat. And the second one was, I wouldn't say complicated, but slightly longer than the previous one with certain terms, certain technical terms which are very much apt to CS. We'll take it up further in vocabulary class, some of the terms which CS should know. Every profession has its own technical terms. So this second exercise had indeed certain technical terms which are very much appropriate to company secretary. For example, policy matters, or something like drafting the policies, or something called compliance of statutory and regulatory requirements. These are general English words, but they are also the technical terms used by a CS. So along with understanding to listen to a dialogue, a conversation, we also learned to associate or to remember as to who spoke what, and we also made an attempt to remember some of the terms one will have to remember when we choose a particular profession. So this is just 2 simple self-assessment questions. What is a dialogue? Yes, I'm sure all of you got it. give an example for a dialogue. You can always quote some of the dialogues you had or the family had, or which you watched on the television or some social media about two people talking. It could be an argument, it could be a debate, it could be an interview, or it could be just seeking information. Now, what do we do in the next session, that is the 4th session? It would be on grammar. In grammar, we'll be discussing the parts of speech. I'm sure all of you are familiar with parts of speech. Generally, people talk of 8 parts of speech, but we're talking about 8 plus 1. I guess short homework. Just refresh your memory about the parts of speech which you studied in school or maybe in your PU classes. Is it clear? Next session would be on grammar. To be specific, it would be parts of speech. We'll be discussing parts of speech, but before we start discussing in the next session, it would be wonderful if each one of you refreshed your memory and remember all the parts of speech which we would be discussing in the next session, that is the 4th session. Thank you. See you in the next session.